Hello everyone, Red Shock is with you, and today, we will hear 5 real scary stories from Reddit. Put likes if you like such stories, write in the comments whether to shoot such videos further. Sit back and we'll start. It was when I was about 9 or 10 years old. At that moment, I was the only man in the family, and my mother was just looking for her loved one, someone who could support us at any moment. One day, she introduced me to Vadim. I must say right away that the man was quite normal, and no oddities were noticed later. They dated my mom for quite a long time, about 2 years, and at some point we finally moved in and started living together. We didn't live in that apartment for long. It was only the 3rd month. The apartment is neat and clean, hot and cold water, heating is available. I remember that for some reason there were icons at every step, but as I understand it, these were already the tricks of my stepfather. The whole point of the story lies in one of the nights spent in this apartment. I didn't have my own room, so I slept on the couch, which was located not far from my parents' bedroom, opposite which there was an old TV. Remember waking up late at night. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The TV was on, but there were only glitches. In the absence of a signal, I was not surprised that nothing was showing, since the TV was old, and in those years it was the norm. At the moment when I decided to look back, I heard someone quietly walking near the bed of my ancestors. I thought it was one of them, but for some reason, I wondered which one of them decided to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and shakes like he's the only one here. Imagine my surprise when my eyes fell on my parents, who were sleeping peacefully together in their bunk. I thought it was glitches from waking up, but still decided to take a look at where the rustle was. There was a black figure standing in the gap between the bed and the other room. She was just looking at someone and sleeping. My heart started beating wildly, and I pulled the blanket over my head like a bullet. I don't know how long I lay there, but towards morning I managed to fall asleep. When I asked my mother in the morning if she had heard anything at night, she did not really answer anything, but only told my story that I had dreamed or Vadim just went out to drink water. But I couldn't have dreamed or imagined such a thing. The TV still did not show any of the programs. It was some kind of proof of what I had seen. In turn, I did not ask Vadim. He pulled away from us a little bit and became somewhat downtrodden. He started drinking, and quite often. For several days, he could drink and sleep non-stop on any of the free sofas or chairs, where he crawled and sleeps there. His mother often tried to reason with him, but he looked at her with sorrow and said that alcohol helps him forget about strange thoughts. A few days later, we moved out of his place to my grandmother's. It was a kind of protest on the part of his mother, so that he would give up his bad habit. I haven't heard from him for a couple of days. On the 4th day after we left, my mother woke me up. She announced to me that Vadim had died, said that she had gone to him, and he was lying lifeless. The stench was unbearable, because the man had been lying dead for several days. It's been 7 years, and my mom hasn't found anyone, and I don't aspire to such a life. Was that moment from the night something strange? Yes, definitely yes. I believe I saw death, but since I woke up, she's gone. And as soon as we moved out and Vadim was left alone, she came for her own. I was about 5 or 6 years old. At that age, I was terrified of literally everything. Any sound or grass I don't understand. Ordinary grass caused me extreme panic, and not only could I not touch the grass, I completely refused to just step on it in my shoes. My parents were very worried about this, and we went to the village to visit relatives. I don't really remember how I spent my leisure time there, but I clearly remember that I was terrified and hysterically afraid of chickens, cows, and fences. The relatives noticed the problem and called the local healer. Note, my mother is a very skeptical person, and she agreed to the help of a healer only out of desperation, and I also try to keep more or less rational views. However, they brought me to a house anyway, and all I remember, or rather, what was deposited in my childhood mind, was that I was sitting in the arms of this healer and just started to see from the pain in my head. And after a while, I'm already 19. My mother told me what was going on. The healer brought some kind of saucer, poured some water into it, and began to whisper something in my ear. As at that time I just screamed like a madman and begged to forgive myself for something, shaking in hysterics. And then, the witch doctor brought a saucer of water to my face, turning me on my side. My tears and snot, or maybe even saliva, flowed into this saucer, and the water began to turn black after that. From that moment on, I stopped being afraid of everything in the world and became more or less an ordinary child. My parents thanked the witch doctor not with money. She categorically refused to take money, and we left. A couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, at another call with relatives, my aunt informs my mother that the healer was not herself for several days, behaved not as usual. She became aggressive and apathetic, and a couple of days later, her body was found with cut veins. And the last thing she said to my mom was that you shouldn't thank her. After all, she had done what she had to do. I grew up almost all my life in a small town in Tajikistan, and we had a house that we inherited from the Germans. And in this house, as my parents told me, a man died of natural causes. It is worth considering that the house was large and with a large plot of land. In general, before that, I lived with my grandmother until I was 3 years old and everything was fine, without any mysticism. But as soon as we moved into this house, strange things started happening. At first, when I was still before school age, I often heard voices from the street, and this continued very often. My parents accordingly did not believe me, and over time I began to forget about it. We had a wooden floor in our living room that crunched if you stepped on it with all your weight, and in this place at night you often heard these sounds, but I didn't pay any attention to it. During the period when I was in the 9th grade, mysticism began to manifest itself not in the form of voices, but in the form of images, which looked very creepy. I saw 2 or 3 times how at night, when I went out on business, or at home at night, when everyone was asleep, I saw a strange dark entity a couple of times that watched me all the time until I noticed it, and it hid behind a wall, and stuck out part of its torso and head. When I felt that someone was watching me, I immediately looked towards the wall, and this creature quickly hid behind the wall with a delay, although there were places where a person could not physically stand behind the wall, since there was no place because of the sofa or other furniture. It was very creepy, of course, but over time I forgot about them. But a year later it appeared again, and this time it was right next to me. In general, in my room, despite my age, we liked to play hide-and-seek with my brothers with the lights off, but the room was a little light, as a lantern from a distant street shone through the window. Here we start playing. I start counting to 10 until they hide. Further, as soon as I stop counting, I start looking for them, and at that moment there was no one in the room, that is, in the field of view. I go to the window to see from there where they could hide, when suddenly a completely dark silhouette appears in front of me, as tall as my brother. Well, I think I've got it all, and I'm starting to chase after him. And as soon as he reaches the closet where the old TV was on the shelf, at this moment, as he approaches the TV point blank, a small flash lights up in the middle of the screen, as if the TV had just been turned off. At this moment, I'm standing in disbelief and trying to figure out what happened. Then I go to the switch and turn on the light, but there is no one in the room, and I start calling my brothers, and they crawl out from under the beds and ask what happened. I start questioning them. Which one of you is running away from me now, and they don't understand what's going on. They said that they were under the bed all the time, and could not physically get out and climb back so quickly, because it was very crowded there, and it took a lot of effort to get there. At that moment, a shiver ran through my body, and I just said that I no longer wanted to be in this room, and left there. It is worth clarifying that I did not sleep there at night, as I liked to fall asleep in the living room, but ironically, I was forced to sleep in this room that summer. At night, I heard a lot of noise, as if someone was walking around the room, deliberately touching pieces of furniture lightly, and at some point someone's breathing could be heard near my ear, which eventually led to me covering my ears with a blanket during sleep, so that these sounds would not interfere with me falling asleep. In general, this is not a very pleasant experience of exploring mysticism. It's not that it's creepy, but the situation I was in then is really scary, and can happen in anyone's life, and it's not a fact that others will be as lucky as I am. I didn't believe in mysticism then, and I still don't believe in it. However, whatever it is, this fortunate super coincidence allows me to write all this now. Then we lived in a private house, far outside the city, and not in the village itself, but away from it. We were separated by a road and a small but dense copse that hid us from the side of the road. Of the neighbors, we had only one family and 2 more houses. However, they lived there only in the summer. I was about 12 or 13 when this incident happened. It was winter. I remember that our only neighbors went to someone in the city that night. I knew about it from their child, with whom we occasionally played together. Therefore, only we are left in our sector. At that time, my father was working the night shift, and only my mother and I were at home. They went to bed early then, because I had to get up early, and my mother had to go to work. I will describe the house plan a little so that it is clearer for the rest of the story. The house was 2 stories high, but the attic was used as a storage room. The room we slept in was a large hall with old windows, with fixed bars. Only one window was made modern just recently, and this is a very important, decisive factor. If you left the room, the door led to the corridor. To the right was a warm kitchen, a veranda with the first main exit, which opened and closed both inside and outside. On the left there is a guest room and a garage with a second exit. However, it was locked from the outside with a lock, and in winter, it was impossible to leave it without first removing the lock from the street. There were no windows in these rooms, except for the kitchen. My bed was right next to the entrance to our room, and my mother's bed was opposite, near the windows themselves, on the right side. The wall that separated me from the corridor was thin, and drafts often walked through it in summer. That is, it had small cracks near the floor that were not well sealed. The house was old. And now let's move on to the main part of the story. We went to bed early, as I said, and my mom and I set the alarm clocks for the morning. I remember for sure that we set them for 6 hours and 10 minutes. I didn't put my push-button phone on charge that night, but put the screen down under my pillow. My mother's phone was touch-sensitive, and it was lying on the bedside table. I fell asleep quickly. However, around 1 o'clock in the morning, my alarm went off. I could barely open my eyes. I was very sleepy. I wasn't even really surprised by this circumstance at the time, although now I understand that there could not have been any alarm clock, because such a time was not even on my alarm list. I just looked at the time, turned off the alarm, and immediately switched off. That's what I remember. Then, according to her mother, her phone's alarm went off just a minute later, but she also quickly turned it off. When she realized that it was late at night, she went back to sleep, not really noticing anything. But again, apparently, after a very short period of time, the phone rang. However, it was no longer an alarm clock, but a call from an unknown number. The first time, Mom just swiped an unfamiliar number, but he almost immediately called back a second, third time. They called before the automatic reset, because when they do not answer for a long time, the call is automatically disconnected. I didn't hear any of this at the time, but Mom, annoyed by the loud melody, finally woke up fully. As she peered into the room, trying to figure out who was calling her so insistently and loudly. And according to her, they called her for a very long time. She noticed the oddity, but not in the room. She smelled it, a strong smell of smoke. She tried to turn on the light by dialing a number that stopped ringing her almost immediately after waking up. However, the electricity was not working. Apparently, either the plugs were knocked out there, or a short circuit in the wiring occurred, as it often happened with us. Mom gets out of bed quickly because the smell is getting stronger. In a matter of seconds, she crosses the room, opening the door, and a thick cloud of smoke and intense heat hits her in the face, causing her to cough. The entire corridor towards the kitchen, the only exit open at that time, was engulfed in a strong fire. It was unrealistic to go there, as she said. The only thing she could do then was to close the door as tightly as possible and pull me out of bed by the scruff of my neck, because I probably didn't wake up then from loud call, because lying against the wall I inhaled seeping smoke. I remember how my mother woke me up, shaking me violently and putting me on the bed, not thinking anything of me. Mom literally pulls herself to the only new window opening in our room and literally pushes her bare foot into a snowdrift in her shirt, grabs the phone and jumps out after her, because the room, despite the closed door, is very quickly covered with black smoke. Delay threatened consequences, and because of this open window, the fire apparently began to spread much faster. I remember waking up abruptly from the cold snow under my bare feet, and how I wanted to cough then in my lungs and throat, as if smoke had settled. My mother took me to the bathhouse on our site as soon as possible, simultaneously calling the rescue service. Firefighters arrived. However, the house could not be saved. It was almost completely wooden, old, and it burned down like a match. There was only the front wall with windows through which we climbed out. The roof and the garage, which had just caught fire, extinguished the charred insides there. I didn't really realize then how lucky we were. And now, 6 years later, I understand how terrible the situation situation was that if it hadn't been for that number, which persistently continued to ring even after ignoring the reset, I would have suffocated in my sleep and burned down. People in a dream do not realize that they are breathing smoke and simply suffocate. A small amount of time is enough. I do not know if it was some kind of mystical bullshit that first, with the help of alarm clocks and then calls, roused us so that we noticed something was wrong, or just an incredible coincidence. Although who needs to call someone else's mobile at 1 o'clock in the morning? However, it definitely wasn't any of the neighbors. They simply weren't there that night, and all the numbers were signed by my mother. And after a while, I tried to call that number, but I never got an answer. It was invalid. Mom herself is sure that this is not an accident. Anyway, I'm grateful for that lucky chance fact or supernatural something that decided to keep us alive. After all, if it weren't for it, we would have died without waking up. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. We studied at a technical school in a small endangered village. The dormitory was also 4 stories high. They put us on the 3rd floor. My neighbor has been an orphan since childhood. At first, some footsteps were heard above the room, then moving, furniture, rustling. I thought that someone lived there, a dorm after all. But a girl from the 2nd year said that there was no one and the floor was sealed. The print on the old paper was not visible. The only thing that is clear is that it is sealed. There have been rumors for a long time that someone was killed there, and the floor was closed. Someone said that at one time a soldier who had deserted from a local unit was hiding there, but these were only rumors. Somehow we stole the keys from the commandant and decided to go there. The floor looked creepy. There is a huge amount of dust underfoot and on the furniture. There was a similar room above our room, and there was furniture, but the presence of anyone was not noticed. The gas was cut off and the electricity cable torn out of the wall, the rotten sewer, and some terrible mattresses. After our trip there, apparently, we roused the evil spirits by our arrival. Some strange things began to happen. Howls, rumbles, screams that came at night from the top floor. We had a strange aunt there. I was doing fortune telling. That's how she told us. You shouldn't have gone there now, there will be problems. I moved out of the dorm in my 2nd year out of harm's way. I don't know how it ended. That's all. Put likes, subscribe to the channel, write your opinion in the comments. Watch my other videos. Thanks for watching.